London Real, one of the coolest up-and-coming podcasts.
Welcome back to London Real. It's Brian Rose coming straight at you from St. Paul's Cathedral right behind me. You know, the Germans tried to bomb the shit out of this thing during World War II, and they could never topple it. It still remained, and it's a beautiful building, and it's a beautiful summer day here in London. I am going to take you for a walk across the Millennium Bridge. Yes, it was built for the Millennium celebrations. It takes us over to the Tate Modern Art Museum, which is beautiful in itself. So I'll walk you through a little bit of London history and show you some sights and scenes. I think you've probably gotten used to all the parks and Shoreditch at this point, so we'll freshen it up a bit. I just wanted to thank everybody for the support for the DMT episode. It was you know, a little controversial to do, and I wasn't quite sure you know, how it would be received or if the police would show up on my doorstep. It's one of these things you just never know, and but we had to do it anyways, and I'm so glad we tossed the show out there. The response has been really positive, so thank you so much for watching it and for your positive comments. It's just been nothing but love when it comes to that show, and I really appreciate that. It's a strange topic that a lot of people don't want to talk about, but it's becoming synonymous with this show, that we do what we like and we talk about what we feel about, and whether that's drinking ayahuasca or smoking the DMT, it's something we have to do. And luckily I don't have a network that I got to worry about, and my advertisers respect the choices that we make, and so we're allowed to do that. You know, that's the beauty of independent media. So it was fun. I hope you guys got something out of the episode. You know, Alexander Ward and I are probably two of the least sensational people that you'll meet or see on television, and so I think some people might have been expecting, you know, some sensational show when we were going to smoke it on air and trip out and all that stuff. You know, if you want that, you need to go to Vice.com, where in my opinion they take something and blow it up 10 times of what it actually is. You know, our DMT show was real, you know, and that's what London Real is all about. You know, it's guys talking about real issues. And so, you know, Alexander and I talked about what we went through. We didn't try to make it big or make it something it wasn't, or include crazy cuts and graphics and stuff like that. So who knows, maybe in the future we'll make shows like that, but for now we're just gonna keep it real and tell you guys what we're thinking and what's happening. So thanks again for tuning in for the DMT show. I really do appreciate that. It was pretty personal, and I know I can be a very hard guy to know. I'm fairly private, so you know, if you do want to get to know me better, hopefully you'll get some glimpses like that on shows like the DMT. So there you go. This week we have the return of Mr. Graham Hancock, and I'll be honest, the first time he came on our show about a year ago, it was a pivotal moment for London Real. We had been working on Graham for 5 or 6 months. He was not easy to land. There were appointments and cancellations, and he wanted us to come out to Bath, and we couldn't. And finally it happened, and it was such a big moment. It was right before we went and saw Joe Rogan, and it was such a powerful episode. It was when Graham Hancock first came clean about his marijuana problem of 24 years and how he was told by Mother Ayahuasca to stop smoking it, and his honesty was just so powerful. And when everyone asks me the definition of an alpha male, I tell them it's someone who is in touch with their feelings and not afraid to be themselves. And in my opinion, Graham Hancock embodies that. He is not afraid to stand up for what he believes and to investigate what he wants, and that's why he has a hard time in the academic community, because, you know, the fact that he goes and drinks the ayahuasca because he thought it was relevant to his research makes him a controversial figure, and of course that's why we love him. So we had him back for version 2. I decided to have Patrick Vickers along with me on this one. He is the ex-Goldman Sachs trader, the MMA fighter, and people were kind of like, why? You know, I just like to shake it up a little bit on the show, and I don't think there's any point in having 3 people with the same viewpoint sitting down at a table. I don't think it's interesting. So as opposed to having someone like Alexander, who knows Graham and who is quite in touch with the ayahuasca scene, I thought we should throw a non-psychedelic taking former banker in. And you know, Patrick gets a lot of garbage for his Goldman Sachs affiliation, but he is one of the coolest and one of the most solid and most real guys I ever met in the city, and that's why you've seen him as co-host so many times. And I like Patrick. He doesn't have an ego. He's great to co-host with because when he has something to say, he says it, and when he doesn't try to stress it. So it was great to have him on. He went after Graham with a few issues that he had as far as his published research, and for a second I was like, Jesus Christ, it was getting to be too much, because I like to keep it an investigative discussion, but I don't want it to be combative. I don't see the point in that. So you probably see me tense up there like at minute 40 where I'm like, Jesus Christ, Patrick, let the man talk. But it was a healthy debate, and by the end of the show, Patrick had bought into the fact that we need to have sovereignty over our own consciousness. It's the most basic of human rights, and without that, everything else is all bullshit. And Graham makes that point very much so. And it's fascinating that once you agree that that's a right, everything else falls away. You know, the importance of religion and the importance of all these other things kind of falls away. So it was nice to see Patrick change his mind. So I hope you guys look forward to that. It's a great episode. Graham's at his best. He talks about War God, and you know, it's always a pleasure having him on. We got him just after the Breaking Convention. He went out of his way to do it, and so we appreciate that very much. You will be seeing brand new pictures of me. I've been spotted in Shoreditch lately, taking some pictures. I got my blue steel look on. I've been posing, and we got a new website coming out, and a new look, new branding, and everything. It's about time, and we're doing it with the folks at Squarespace, and that's kind of a coincidence. They're also advertising with us. You know, if you don't know, Squarespace is an all-in-one web creation tool, and you can go on there and choose what you want to do, podcast, creative, whatever, and you can make it look beautiful quickly. And it's also cheap, and you can even register your URL with them, and it works on any device. But you have to have a website that works on tablets and works on iPhones these days. You can't just have one site. So we're using them. I'm actually using Squarespace right now to publish Silicone Reel, and it's the easiest thing I've ever done. It's like just drag and drop these audio files. It's like boom, boom, boom. So much easier than what I'm doing now with WordPress. So if you would like to check out Squarespace, my co-host Colin Pyle turned his personal website over there. Melissa Terry from the University of Greenwich, she moved hers over there. So if you want to do that, please check them out. You can start without any credit card for free. Go to squarespace.com/London Real. And like I always say, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So do it right with your website the first time. Again, it's squarespace.com, and you can use the customer code London8 and get 10% off. Behind me you see the Tate Modern Museum. It used to be, I think, an electrical power plant or something like that, and they turned it into a dope museum. You might have also seen the Shard behind me. That's now the tallest building in Western Europe. Again, St. Paul's behind me somewhere. And yeah, it's a bit of living history. Beautiful summer day here in London. I'm liking it. And yes, I'm going to yap for a bit longer here and let you know what's coming up. We got Dan Hardy in the house in 2 weeks. It's going to be a fantastic show sitting down with him. You know, London Real and Dan Hardy are pretty synonymous when it comes to our interest in psychedelics, our interest in mixed martial arts. And so it's going to be fantastic to sit down and talk with Dan. Really looking forward to that. It's going to be another potentially epic episode. If you guys have been watching London Real or following my Twitter feed, then you also know that I am now bulletproof. Yes, it means every morning I take my bulletproof coffee, which is extremely low in mycotoxins, which is a form of mold, and I make it with a slab or a nice little chunk of grass-fed butter. And then I put upgraded MCT oil in there. I mix it all up, and that is my meal in the morning. And I just love it. And I cannot emphasize enough of the people I think should try this, especially if you want to lose that 5 or 10 pounds, or maybe even 20. I think it's the perfect way to get your brain going right in the morning, and to basically get you burning these high-quality fats and oils. And I love it. All my boys are doing it. You know, Peter Irving was doing it. Paul G's doing it. All the guys in the know are doing it, and they're loving it. Colin Pyle as well. So if it's the one thing that I would say to change about your diet, it's this. It's simple. And out of all the different things I've tried, I've gone gluten-free, which is another thing that the Bulletproof exec Dave Asprey talks about. I really try to avoid gluten at all times these days. That, avoiding sugar, and then bulletproofing and just eating intelligently has just taken me a long way. You know, I'm 42 and I'm in sick shape, So, check it out. If you want to learn more about his stuff, go to bulletproofexec.com. He's got like 200,000 words of free content. And if you want to buy his stuff, you can click right here on YouTube, or go onto the London Real site, or go to upgradedself.com, get the coffee, and, change your life. This is a great time to start in the summer, and I really think you'll enjoy it. Now, if you're in Europe, it's even easier to get the Bulletproof, and that's with the guys at Xbrain. I've been talking about this for a while. I love these guys. I love the service they provide. If you go to xbrain.co.uk, you can literally get a bag of that coffee and a bottle of that MCT oil. You can have it on your door in 2 days, and you can start making those changes. And I love it. I love the service. They've also got all the Honor products. And on top of that, they've got some new proprietary line, which I've started. I don't normally take a multivitamin, but the Spectrum multivitamin that they've created now, I'm loving it. I've been on it now for about 4 or 5 days. I take 2 every morning, and I really enjoy it. It's got all sorts of natural stuff in there. It's vegetarian friendly, and they've got more lines coming out. These guys are very serious about their products. They're going to have a new organic whey protein that they spend a lot of time developing. So check them out. Big fans of the guys at Xbrain, and they sponsor the show, and they believe in all the crazy shit we do here. I didn't get any heat from any of my advertisers when it came to the DMT episode, and that says a lot about them, and the fact that they believe in us. So if you want to support us, support the site, click through and get something from them. Like I said, I'm a big fan of the Bulletproof coffee, and I think that's the way to go. And that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this beautiful tour of London. That was the Millennium Bridge, and of course, that's the Tate Modern behind me. Get your ass to London. It's a dope city. If you want to get involved in London Real, send me an email at info@londonreal.tv. Volunteer your services as an intern, as a blogger, as anything. We need help with Final Cut Pro, you name it. Also with Silicon Reel, check that out. We just filmed our 6th episode. It is fun as hell. Really enjoying it. I was at the Drink About last night. Such cool people. If you want to volunteer for that, that's cool. Check us out on Twitter @SiliconReel. We're on Facebook as well. It's a lot of fun. I'm so glad we're doing this. It takes time away, but it's just good energy, and you never know. These tech guys might be up to something. So check that out. If you're listening to us, please subscribe. And that's it, man. In the meantime, be good to each other. Thank you so much for the support. Blessed with all that stuff. And yeah, that's it, man. Increase the peace. And now I give you Mr. Graham Hancock. Here we go. All right. Okay, good. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. It is a beautiful summer day here in London, and a beautiful day for a trialogue, which is the term I think was coined by Terence McKenna and Rupert Sheldrake back in the day for a 3-way discussion. And yeah, it's just a great way to kind of relate to people. My co-host today is Patrick Vickers, former derivatives trader at Goldman Sachs, turned mixed martial arts fighter, turned fighter promoter. You were one of the first guests on the show back in the day, and kind of our angel investor. You came in here and put everything on the line, so thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You've also co-hosted a bunch in the past, and I like Patrick. He gives a little bit different perspective than me. He's got different views on psychedelics than me. He's younger, so it's nice to have that balance.
So a banker and a fighter.
Yeah, I know, like quite a combo. And our guest today is Mr. Graham Hancock himself. He is a British writer, a journalist whose books include The Sign and the Seal, Fingerprints of the Gods, and his fiction works. You would know Entangled, and most recently, War God, which last time he was here, he was describing the book to Nick and I, and we were like, can't wait until we read this because it just sounded so exciting, and the way that you described the events that were happening in, well, what is now Mexico.
What is now Mexico, and what was then an unknown land to Europeans. When Cortez turned up there in February 1519 with 490 men in 11 ships, he was after gold. And he really had no idea what he was going to confront. Last thing he expected was to be confronting a gigantic military empire that cut the hearts out of those who they captured in battle. I mean, literally, human sacrifice was the central activity of the Aztec Empire, who had knights, who had a code of honor, who were trained for warfare from childhood. This was what those who they captured in battle. I mean, literally, human sacrifice was the central activity of the Aztec Empire, who had knights, who had a code of honor, who were trained for warfare from childhood. This was what Cortés confronted, and the Aztecs could put 200,000 men into the field. You know,
it's hard to conceive of those numbers.
I mean, you have to say that those 490 Spaniards, they were brutal men. They were cruel, callous, single-minded men. But you have to say they did have balls of steel. You know, because
just the crossing itself would have been difficult enough, right?
Yeah,
that sharpens the iron. I would imagine that cross.
Just what?
Just getting across to the country in the first place.
The Spanish had been in Cuba since 1492, since the time of Columbus, but they had not ventured onto the mainland, apart from a couple of tiny little expeditions which just went there to just check it out and see what was happening. And the year before, 1518, one of those expeditions, just of 3 ships and about 110 men, had taken a savage beating at the hands of the Maya, who were another of the indigenous peoples of Mexico. And Cortés was aware of this. They were aware that they were dealing with people very different from themselves. They felt they had the edge because both the Maya and the Aztecs only had stone weapons. They did not have metal weapons. And the Spanish had a powerful belief in their own abilities. They'd just come through 700 years of what is called the Reconquista, the war with Islam in Spain. They had driven the Moors out of Spain, and so they were a martial culture. Yeah. And they were hungry for gold. And they didn't find much gold on Cuba and Hispaniola. So they prepared this expedition to go to the mainland. But it was a really tiny thing. It was 490 men. It was 11 ships. They had 16 cavalry. And they just had only the faintest idea of what they were getting themselves into. So whatever else we can say about them, and there's a lot we can say about them, we have to say that there was a certain element of courage and daring in what they undertook. It was a short voyage from Cuba across to the mainland, just a matter of 4 days. But then 2 years of war once they landed on the mainland, before Cortés finally completely conquered and destroyed Tenochtitlan, which was the capital city of the Aztecs. And I think one of the things that appealed to me about the story is it's a turning point in human history. Both sides, both the Aztecs and the Spanish, believed in supernatural forces, and I'm very interested in the supernatural. Both Cortés and Moctezuma were in communication with entities. The entity Cortés was in communication with, he thought, was St. Peter. And the entity Moctezuma was in communication with was the war god of the Aztecs. And he communicated with him by eating psilocybin mushrooms and entering a trance state. And then he encountered this entity who frequently gave him incredibly bad advice. And all of this is kind of thrown into the mix of what is, at one level, just the story of an extraordinary adventure. And at another level, a story of the spiritual forces at work behind human history. And at another level still, a story of the ability of what is good in the human spirit, the ability to love, the ability to care and to act decently, even in the darkest of times, is something that I try to bring out in this novel as well.
How's the reception been to the book?
Well, you know, it's very difficult I'm known as a non-fiction author.
I know.
And it's very difficult to change genres in mid-career. I liken it to, I don't know, Volvo suddenly producing perfume or something. I mean, maybe they do. I don't know. But both bookshops, the publishers, and the readership tend to expect a particular kind of book from a particular author, and to start producing books that are very different, it takes a little bit of adjustment. But I've had enormous support from the community that I'm in touch with through my Facebook pages, through my website, and they've shown great enthusiasm for and interest in this book, and yeah, have helped me out by buying the book, and it seems from the reviews on Amazon, appreciating the book. You know, the first thing you have to do as a novelist is tell a good story. You have to tell a story that doesn't bore people. That is the first duty of the novelist. Do not bore your readers. And then once you hit that target, the next thing I feel is important in a novel is to interweave fascinating themes and extraordinary possibilities that might be difficult to explore in non-fiction works.
You said when you were here last on the show that it was refreshing for you to write a piece of fiction because you didn't have to get ready to rebut everyone on all of your points and to get ready for the fight that you've had to do with Fingerprints of the Gods and your other books. That once it's fiction, then they kind of let you do what you want to do.
That's the great thing about fiction, is complete liberty for the author to do whatever he or she wants. With non-fiction, you're presenting a body of work to the public and to a critical academic establishment, which is in the realm of facts. And that means that every fact, or everything that you present as a fact, will be pored over and studied, particularly if what you're writing is controversial or if it goes against the mainstream. You know, frankly, if you write a non-fiction book which is within the framework of accepted history, it's not likely to be deeply investigated critically. But if you're going against the grain, and if you're writing, if you like, alternative history, which is what I do, then expect everything that you say to be turned over forensically, very, very closely, by large numbers of hostile academics who would like to find problems and faults in what you've said, because what you've said is challenging to them and to their worldview and indeed to their careers. So you have to brace yourself for a fight. And I've been doing that for many years, since even before I wrote Fingerprints of the Gods, even with Sign and the Seal in 1992. That also was a controversial book and does not take a mainstream view of history. And what I discovered, you know, as I ventured further down this path, was I could not ignore the academic critics, and nor could I ignore the dirty tricks and the games that are played to discredit a writer who is not a member of the club. Therefore, I had to take all of that into account in creating my books and create arguments and bodies of data which it would be very difficult for them to disprove or to argue against, to really nail down my facts and to thoroughly document and reference them, so that if they doubt that fact, they could go to my references, check the references, see where the facts come from. And this meant that I was writing increasingly defensively. I think it definitely caused me to up my game.
Right.
It definitely caused me in a way to write more academically sound books, but also books that for me as a writer were more boring to write and were perhaps less adventurous than I had been when I was in the place where I wrote Fingerprints of the Gods. And I still want to have adventure, and I want to explore ideas in an adventurous way. And fiction gives me a license to do that.
Did you ever think about writing peer-reviewed work? So publishing in scientific journals in order to, because that would, if you could do that, then that would silence all of your critics. Yeah,
in a sense that's not my role. Once you enter into the peer review process, then you've become one of them. But if what you say is against the mainstream, you don't have you're just playing by their rules.
in order to get your point across?
Oh, I do try to play by their rules, but you try to get an article published in an archaeological magazine which suggests that the origins of Egyptian civilization may be more than 12,000 years in the past, and I guarantee you it'll never happen. It'll never happen. The only way you're going to get those ideas in front of the public is not to go through the peer review process, because the peer review process will filter you out right at the beginning. This hypothesis is impossible, the peer reviewers will say. So do not even consider getting it published. You don't get alternative history published in mainstream archaeology magazines. What mainstream archaeology magazines do with alternative history is to try to rubbish it, to pour scorn upon it, to demolish it. There's absolutely no question of becoming part of the club, because the club, by definition, does not believe in alternative history. So the only way is to appeal directly to the public and to present arguments and evidence. Now, this is precisely what I'm saying. When I have been going down the road that I've gone down and writing books of alternative history, I have increasingly played by their rules. I have increasingly footnoted and referenced and documented every statement that I make, but I don't kid myself for a moment that I would ever get that material in a mainstream archaeological magazine. I just know for sure that I would not. They regard me as the devil incarnate. A British Museum recently refused to allow a TV station even to film with me inside the British Museum, because I'm considered to be, not part of the club.
You know, on top of that, you talked about reinventing yourself with fiction. I mean, your whole career, it seems like you've kind of reinvented yourself, being a proponent of ayahuasca and the benefits of some psychedelics. You've just literally come from the Breaking Convention.
Yes.
In London, I think you did the keynote address to close out at the convention. And people that don't know, the Breaking Convention it's the biannual conference on psychedelic consciousness. It has pretty much a who's who around the world of people involved in the
leading researchers in the field of psychedelics.
Right.
See, again, I've always felt as a researcher that I need to be directly involved in the subject that I'm researching. It's pointless to just sit in an armchair and theorize about things, and therefore, when writing about altered states of consciousness, it was necessary for me to experience altered states of consciousness, and that's what drew me to ayahuasca in the first place, and to go down to the Amazon and drink with shamans there. I suppose, in a way, I have become an advocate or a spokesman for ayahuasca, because I think ayahuasca is a very important, if challenging, experience to have. I think, in a way, I would just say this as friendly advice to fellow human beings. It's a pity to go through this incredible, extraordinary gift called life, and simply never to take the opportunity to have that experience. You know, just as one might say, pity to go through life and never take the opportunity, I don't know, to climb a mountain,
have a child,
or go skydiving. You know, I mean, there are a lot of interesting things to do which challenge us, and I would rank ayahuasca amongst those. Actually, amongst the most challenging things that it's possible for a human being to do. And it's not for everyone, and I'm the first to say that it is an extremely serious matter, and nobody should undertake an ayahuasca journey lightly, or indeed a series of ayahuasca journeys. This is something that sooner or later will confront you with profound challenges, and will challenge your view of the nature of reality, and will challenge your ideas about yourself. But I think those experiences are worth having, and I've certainly found them valuable for me.
You've just come from this convention, and I was wondering if you could tell us, in your opinion, what is the current state of the union when it comes to the world's acceptance of psychedelics as important medicines, or plant allies, as you've coined that term, for the human race? I mean, how have we done the last couple years? If you had to give yourself a grade.
I would say there's been considerable progress in the last couple of years, in the sense that some powerful psychedelics, such as psilocybin, are now being tested in certain clinical trials. For example, as a possible cure for depression.
Yeah.
For example, dealing with the anxiety about death for terminal cancer patients. And the therapeutic benefits of psychedelics are beginning to be reluctantly recognized by a medical establishment that has been scared off working with psychedelics for decades because of that evil and wicked enterprise called the war on drugs, which has denied us the benefits of these extraordinary agents of consciousness change for many, many, many years. Just beginning to get their toes in the water now, beginning to do a little bit of research. The research up till now must fit into the therapeutic model. The objective of the research must be to find some therapeutic benefit for LSD or for psilocybin. I would like to see it go much further than that, but I recognize that is an important first step. And there's no doubt that these are powerful medicines and that they can be enormously beneficial if used responsibly in the right setting with the right intention. But I think it needs to go further. I think that what psychedelics offer us is the opportunity to explore the mystery of consciousness itself and to investigate the nature of reality. I mean, again, this is something, we think we know what reality is, but all we really know is what we've been told reality is from our childhood onward. It's what our society gives us. Is we have a reference frame on reality. And right now, in Western technological societies, the idea is reality is this stuff, matter, right. Material things. That is that all aspects of reality may in one way or another be reduced to matter or to the spaces between matter. But that is not a fact. That is just an idea about the nature of reality. And psychedelics offer the opportunity to test and investigate that idea much more deeply, and to explore, for example, paranormal experiences. One of the great difficulties with the paranormal is that it seems so random. It's difficult to set up a controlled test for paranormal abilities or paranormal experiences. But with psychedelics, you can do that. You can put people into deeply altered states of consciousness pretty much on demand with DMT or psilocybin. And you can begin to compare notes amongst different volunteers and see what they are experiencing. So there was this remarkable finding that came out of, I wouldn't call it a finding really, but Rick Strassman's work at the University of New Mexico with DMT, where again, his brief was to look for a therapeutic use for DMT. But what he found was repeatedly evidence that challenged the materialist view of reality, and particularly encounters by the volunteers with what appeared to be intelligent entities who were not physical. Who were not physical in nature. And that haunting phrase that several of the volunteers came back and reported, that the entities had said to them, we're so glad you've discovered this technology. Now we can communicate with you more easily. Hey, suppose that's true. Suppose DMT is a technology for talking with intelligences from other dimensions or other levels of reality. It would be so important for us to investigate that, Great if we're doing research into the therapeutic potential of psychedelics. Wonderful. Let's do as much of that as possible and see what they're good for and what they're not good for. But my goodness, let's also use them to explore the nature of reality. Quantum physicists are already open to the idea that there's more than one dimension, that there may be multiple dimensions. Perhaps those dimensions are inhabited by intelligent beings, and perhaps that's exactly what we get into in the DMT state. So here's a powerful tool for investigating reality, and perhaps for radically reshaping our view of what reality is, and perhaps for learning as well, if we think we can learn from other cultures in this level of reality, how much more might we learn from the inhabitants of other dimensions? It's a hypothesis,
yeah,
which is worth testing. It's not a belief. This is a hypothesis, which is testable. with a substance like DMT, if we can get rid of this paranoia, this mad fear of altering consciousness, which irrationally drives our society to acts of incredible stupidity.
Yeah, anyone who's been on a DMT experience, psilocybin, ayahuasca, which I have all of them, can understand what you're talking about. Yeah. And when you come back, you can say, no, this is reality. But then how is that any different from your DMT experience? Is that a reality? And so I understand what you're saying. Part of the reason I wanted Patrick here is because I don't think you have really any history with psychedelics. And I think you probably represent that person who might be listening and saying, you guys are talking ridiculousness, this stuff is not provable, and I just wanted to get your thoughts. And then I wanted to wonder, what do you say when someone from the public comes up to you, say like Patrick, and just says, I don't believe any of this, it scares me? First, I'll get your thoughts first.
So it just feels to me that mankind is obsessed with not just being here for a given period of time and looking for some sort of deeper, more meaningful purpose. And because of that, you look for other reasons and other, whether it's religion, whether it's, reincarnation, because no one wants to believe that they have 70 years on the planet and then they degrade and nothing else becomes of you. So it just feels a little bit like you're, I wouldn't say clutching at straws, but looking for answers to avoid just being, faced with this very bleak alternative.
Sure, no, I understand that. I would actually put it the other way around, and I would say that the person who says and passionately believes that there is nothing beyond this life, and when we die we're just dead and they're meat, that I would say they're actually clutching at straws, because that's a really hopeful and positive position to have. Much more worrying to have the notion that every action, every thought, every second of your life counts in the much longer term, and that the mistakes and errors that you make in this life may not just be wiped away
echo in
with
eternity,
your death,
as it were, yeah.
but may have massive implications for you throughout eternity and infinity. I mean, to me, that's actually not a comforting idea at all. That's an extremely worrying idea, and it's one of the ideas.
But doesn't that sound like a bit like religion?
Well, yes, of course it sounds like religion. Where do you think religions come from? I mean, religions come fundamentally from visionary experiences. Moses in front of the burning bush, St. Paul on the Damascus Road, the Prophet Muhammad shivering in his cave, meeting the entity that he construes as the angel Gabriel. You scratch any of the big monotheistic mainstream religions, and you'll find shamanistic experiences in altered states of consciousness right there under the surface, of course overlaid in subsequent years by layers of bureaucracy and power-hungry priests and rabbis and mullahs who've imposed a social structure upon it. But the essential experience is an experience of altered states of consciousness. And I think actually that any point of view is reasonable on this, but until one has actually had the experience, I don't think you're in a strong position to suggest that the experience is just wishful thinking or anything like that until you've actually had it. And I'm not saying that when you have it will change your point of view, but I think it puts you in a much stronger position to make that argument if you have had that experience yourself.
But really, it comes down, doesn't it, to personal experience at the moment? It can't really be quantified or in a scientific way.
That's my
proved.
point. I think it could be. I think that psychedelics, and particularly a psychedelic like DMT, which will put you into a profoundly altered state of consciousness in a matter of seconds, wherever you are. It doesn't matter the location. You are going to go, on that rocket ship to the other side of reality incredibly quickly. Well, that allows the opportunity for controlled investigation of those states of consciousness. If we as a society were prepared to do that, if we as a society were not so rigidly sure that we have closed our accounts with reality, if we thought maybe we haven't actually closed our accounts with reality, that would be a really good way to investigate reality. For example, do the volunteers who are put on a powerful dose of DMT, do they return with novel information which they might not have obtained otherwise? Have they learned something that they, in theory, couldn't possibly couldn't possibly know. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence for this, but I would like to see it made the subject of a rigorous scientific study to see what comes out of it. And I think that it's really only an ideological issue that prevents us from doing that. We have an ideological objection to the use of chemicals to alter consciousness, and that ideological objection has taken deep root in our society today, and it has mobilized a great deal of public money, so that there are large agencies which are involved in the war on drugs, in persuading us that it's wrong to alter our consciousness in these ways, which employ tens of thousands of staff who have an investment in maintaining that situation.
Because you're of the view that it's a sovereign right, basically, to do whatever you want to your
your own body and your own consciousness. Yes, I think that's a fundamental sovereign right. I think we need to make careful distinction here between behavior that affects others negatively.
Yeah.
For which we already have adequate laws.
Criminal laws, yeah.
We've got plenty of those laws, and I'm a total supporter of those laws. And actions which relate totally to our own body and our own consciousness.
But there's stuff that falls slightly in the grey there.
Not really.
Well, what about healthcare? So why should my tax dollars be spent looking after someone that's wrecked their body by heroin addiction?
Well, then why are your tax dollars being spent on somebody who's wrecked their body from alcohol or smoking cigarettes?
So
we accept that principle that people who've wrecked their bodies.
I agree entirely that the way that the chart has been drawn up is completely wrong in terms that alcohol is fine and acceptable and marijuana isn't acceptable. For me, if you look at when we had Dr. Nutt on, when he came on, he made absolute perfect sense and he presented very fairly, and I completely accept that the way that we've quantified and characterized all of these drugs is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But,
or paracetamol, which kills about 3,000 people.
And there's issues with big business and big pharma, but there's still, regardless of that point, there are still, regardless of how we characterize what's good and what's a bad drug, there are still issues that some of these drugs cause grey area issues in terms of impact on society through healthcare.
I think you get into a very complicated area of discussion there, because then you're really getting into social engineering on a huge scale. For example, lifestyle. Are we going to deny medical care to those who live unhealthy lifestyles? Because my goodness, they cost the health services a great deal of money every year. If an adult male reaches beyond a certain weight,
BMI, absolutely.
BMI. Should we then withdraw healthcare?
It's an incredibly difficult.
Since we don't do that for all of those other things, it seems to me very odd that we discriminate against consciousness-altering drugs.
Absolutely, but a line has to be drawn at some level, and
I agree with that. And this will be probably to be continued, because I've only got a few minutes here. But I was having the same argument with Patrick earlier about the criminalization, and then bringing up things that tax the healthcare system, and then you could say an unhealthy diet does the same. I do fundamentally think a core ownership of your own sovereignty of your own body is very important. But then again,
I think if I may just say, if we can't make decisions, right or wrong, about our own bodies and our own consciousness, if we live in a society that absolutely will not allow us to do that, then I think there's something fundamentally wrong with that society, and I think it poisons and taints every other aspect of what that society does. And if there are some social costs from allowing that freedom, I would welcome those social costs, because the freedom itself trumps them. It's more important than anything else. It says something about the kind of society we live in, that we live in a society that tolerates adult sovereignty over one's self. This is a very important principle, and it's a more important principle than relatively minor costs to the healthcare system.
I think that's a fair point, that some costs have to be, there's always going to be consequences of every single action, and there are some costs.
Cars. I mean, look at the vast social costs of driving cars, but nobody questions that as something that we do, and you try and take away people's right to drive cars because of the social costs. You're going to have a revolution on your hands.
Do you think that we're more open to that idea because we've had these altered states of consciousness and we see the value? For example, maybe in your younger years before ayahuasca, you might have been less interested in personal sovereignty?
Yeah, there was a time when I can remember a time in certainly in my early 30s, even perhaps my late 30s, when I felt that the drug laws made perfect sense. Now, to me, they're a gross abuse of human rights, and I can't understand. I actually can't understand how it's possible for anybody to support them. They're just so plainly, patently, obviously wrong. Just like laws against witchcraft are used to exist and actually are really, really wrong, or giving people criminal sanctions for being gay, which used to happen in our society not so long ago. We all understand now that this is just terribly wicked and evil laws, and we're so relieved that we've got rid of those terrible laws. Right. And I hope the time will come when we'll be relieved that we've got rid of the terrible laws that penalize adults for making basically lifestyle choices about their own bodies and their own consciousness.
And like with the gay rights issue, you can say that the gay people have had a hard time, but us as a society, when we demonize a certain group, we die a little bit inside.
I think it's a death for our society. I think the war on drugs has terrible consequences for our society in so many ways, but fundamentally at the level of consciousness, I think it creates a dark cloud over the kind of society we live in, and I think that to lift that cloud of society would be an act of great good.
The last time you were here, you were so honest about your own experiences with cannabis, and I know you've talked about it since, and it's such an interesting phenomenon because you talk about the benefits of a certain plant ally, and then you've said I don't no longer need currently the benefits of this plant ally, and I think it's a fantastic juxtaposition.
Well, this was a choice. I feel this is my right as a sovereign adult to make choices over my own body, and it just happens that as a result of experiences with ayahuasca in late 2011, I interrupted a 24-year non-stop cannabis habit, and there was a time when my cannabis habit was really good for me, and I felt really good about it, and I think I would not have written many of my books of historical mystery if I hadn't smoked cannabis. But my relationship with cannabis became abusive, and it ceased to serve me. I began to serve it. I do not blame cannabis for this. I think cannabis is a wonderful plant ally. I think it can be used responsibly in a nurturing and beneficial way. Unfortunately, I wasn't doing that. Right. Ayahuasca helped me to see that.
How has the cannabis community reacted overall?
Well, there was some hostility to my making public the fact that after 24 years of non-stop cannabis smoking, I had given up cannabis after a series of 5 utterly life-changing, I would say actually devastating ayahuasca experiences in Brazil, which just made it clear to me that I was getting bent out of shape in all sorts of ways. And I think the feeling was that I was saying cannabis always bends you out of shape, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that at all. I highly value cannabis. I think that it is a wonderful sensual ally, and a wonderful creative ally. But I think like any powerful herb, it needs to be used in a responsible and careful manner if you as an individual are going to get benefits out of it rather than disadvantages. And I tipped in the wrong direction, so that every morning I would fire up my vaporizer by 9 o'clock, and I would just continue to vaporize cannabis all day long. And often that would be until 2 o'clock the next morning, and I'd be sitting there writing, and my whole life revolved around this. And what had happened, I couldn't get perspective on it when I was in it, but what had happened was that I had become a servant of the herb. The herb was not serving me any longer, and that's what my ayahuasca experiences showed me, and made it absolutely clear to me. Weirdly, not only made it clear to me that I needed to stop doing that, but in a way made it impossible for me to do that anymore. Because when I tried to smoke cannabis, when I came back to England, I was just filled with horror and revulsion to such an overwhelming degree that I actually couldn't continue.
Wow, so powerful.
And I felt... what I feel is that for me, it's been a great benefit that I have stopped smoking cannabis. My life has improved in huge numbers of ways. I still miss it. I would still love to fire up a joint of an evening. And if I was confident that I could just do that, that once every 4 or 5 days, I could smoke a nice joint in the evening or fire up my vaporizer and have a bag, you know. If I was confident I could do that, I think I would carry on smoking cannabis. But I'm not confident I could do that. I became dependent on it, and that dependency did not serve me. I know many other people who have got constructive and positive relationships with cannabis, and good for them. That's their adult sovereign choice. But I reached a point where I needed to stop, and I did.
Fantastic. You know, you're no stranger to controversy for your whole career. And we've had one of, I guess we wouldn't call him a colleague, but a peer, Rupert Sheldrake, on in the past. And we had a great discussion with him. And I know it's probably been discussed, but I kind of wanted to know what the current state was between yourselves and the TED Talk people. Has the issue kind of been dealt with and squashed, or is there still unfinished business between the two of you? I know that they had kind of relegated your talks to a kind of the bad behavior
Rupert
corner.
calls it the naughty corner.
The naughty corner.
On the TED website, yeah.
Right, and they had called it pseudo-archaeology, pseudo-science, which you've been hearing probably most of your career.
Yeah.
And then they put it to the corner, and then...
You know, there's some very intelligent people involved in the running of TED, but...
They did you a big favor in a
Well,
way.
I have to say the way that they handled this whole operation was just really stupid.
Can you break it down for people that aren't totally familiar?
Well, first of all, it was clear that they were reacting to me and to Rupert not on the basis of what we actually said in our talks, but on preconceptions that they had about us as individuals. See, with TEDx, the decision to put on the event is taken at a local level. It's not taken by TED Central. TED Central are approached by local conference organizers all around the world, thousands and thousands of them, who say we'd like to organize a conference around this subject. In our case, the subject was challenging existing paradigms, as a matter of fact. And TED will then give them a license to put on what is called a TEDx conference, which is not going to be like the grand TED conferences with huge numbers of attendees, but might have 200-300 attendees and a dozen speakers or so, run for a day. So TED do not vet the contents of the program at the outset. All the talks are put up on the TEDx YouTube channel. Then what happened was my talk was up there, Rupert's talk was up there, and so were the talks of about 10 other people who spoke at TEDx Whitechapel in January 2013. But then what happened was our talks began to attract attention. Firstly, my talk had 132,000 views on their YouTube channel within about 2 to 3 weeks of being put up. Rupert's talk got huge numbers of views as well. And scientists who are connected to TED went to TED and protested, how can you give a stage to these individuals? You know, Rupert's talk was called The Science Delusion. Hancock's talk is called The War on Consciousness, and Hancock is known to be a pseudoscientist because he challenges the existing model of history. How can you put these talks up on your channel at all? And TED apparently got frightened. So when they took the talks down, they issued a statement, and every single thing that they said about my talk in their statement, and the same is true of Rupert's talk, everything they said about my talk in their statement turned out to be false. I had not said that. They said, for example, that Hancock says that by drinking ayahuasca, you may gain direct contact with an ancient mother culture. Nowhere in my talk do I say that. I don't say it anywhere. But they had a preconception that I was the kind of person who might say that. So rather than actually sitting down and listening, it's only 18 minutes, and listening carefully to the talk, they bounced out with their preconceptions, stated them as facts, and then had to do a humiliating about-turn when they were unable to substantiate a single thing that they had said about my talk or about Rupert's talk. End result, on the naughty corner of the TED website, their statements are still there, but they're now all crossed out. And underneath them, in full, are published the rebuttals that Rupert and I made. And that was the agreement we made with TED, that they would have to publish our rebuttals, and they would have to cross out their false and unsubstantiable statements, which they did do. But what they would not do is reinstall our talks on their YouTube channel, which of course is their right. I mean, they're the broadcaster. They can decide what they want to host and what they don't want to host, but they do keep the talks there online in the naughty corner of their website. Now, there was a huge furore around this, an enormous reaction on the internet. The internet does not like censorship.
No.
The spirit of the internet is freedom of information, and the whiff of censorship that surrounded this, that Ted actually felt that these talks were too dangerous to be seen by adult, rational people out there, was very annoying to a lot of adult, rational people. Felt that Ted had gone too far, that this was a paternalistic act of ideological censorship, and it resulted in a huge outcry on the internet. The talks were re-uploaded onto dozens of independent YouTube channels, where they then proceeded to attract...
It backfired massively, right?
It backfired massively on TED. I mean, if their objective, was to, I don't know, keep us quiet, then they should have taken a completely different strategy from the strategy they took.
It makes them look very much part of the mainstream conspiracy, right?
It makes them look part of the mainstream conspiracy, and this is I think, not something that Ted had thought through, because their brand, if you like, is about free thinking and challenging ideas.
Changing the paradigm, or whatever the name of the conference was, what do they expect? If they really want to bring people in that are going to do that.
The fundamental issue, it rapidly became clear, was, and what was the common point between my talk and Rupert's talk, and these two talks were otherwise very different. The fundamental issue was that we are both open to the possibility that consciousness may not be localized to the brain, that the brain may be a vehicle for consciousness, that it may be a transceiver of consciousness rather than a generator of consciousness. And that idea of the non-locality of consciousness, which is being taken very seriously by leading researchers in consciousness studies at the moment, turns out bumps up against a fundamental dogma of the small group of scientists who advise TED, because all of those scientists define themselves as materialists.
But it's what we
and a materialist is not somebody who loves material things. It's somebody who believes that everything may be reduced to matter, including consciousness.
But it's what we discussed before when we were talking on the topic. It's, at the moment, it's an idea, right? It's a theory. It's not something that can, at this stage, until we do the research,
the non-locality of consciousness,
that can be proved at the moment.
The non-locality of consciousness is indeed a theory, and so is the locality of consciousness. The notion that consciousness is an epiphenomenon of brain activity is not a fact. It is also.
But they can't criticize you for it being pseudoscience when you're not like saying here's the hard data. You're saying that it's one potential
an idea
theory.
that is worthy of exploration. That we the point is that we don't really know what consciousness is. And that conflicts with materialist dogma, and materialist dogma is the death of science, in my view. Science should remain open-minded and inquisitive on unsolved questions, and should not be in the business of persecuting and shutting down those who seek to inquire into those questions. For a very long time, we have the so-called Ptolemaic model of the universe. The Ptolemaic model, the Earth was at the center. The sun revolved around the Earth. The planets and all the stars revolved around the Earth. For those who held to the Ptolemaic model, it just seemed so completely obvious that that was correct. I mean, you just have to look up at the sky. You see the sun is going around the Earth. It's so obvious to them. For centuries and centuries, this seemed to be the obvious idea. And those who held an alternative idea that actually the Earth was going around the sun, the planets were going around the sun, those who held that idea were at risk of their lives. They were actually burnt at the stake. Giordano Bruno was burnt at the stake. Copernicus hid his research until after his death because he feared to be burnt at the stake. But Copernicus and Giordano Bruno were right. Galileo was shown the instruments that he would be tortured with unless he accepted that the Earth did not move. And he recanted at the last moment and said, "Okay, it doesn't move if that's what you want me to say." So it's the same. It's the same issue with consciousness right now. All sorts of efforts are being made by materialist science to deal with anomalous evidence. There was anomalous evidence in the Ptolemaic model. The movements of the planets didn't really fit, but then they invented new epicycles that would explain why they moved in that way. And now we have anomalous evidence on telepathy.
Why do you think people are so obsessed with the status quo? What's the driving force?
I think there's a feeling of safety in the status quo. And not only that, but that one's own ego and one's sense of self and place in the world becomes invested in particular ideas. The ideas become reified. The ideas become things. And they take on a monumental power and strength. And I think that once they're really, if you look at it, for example, the ideas contained in the mainstream religions, those ideas until the 1700s were leading Christians to burn fellow human beings at the stake, are still leading Muslims today to stone women to death, are leading the Temple Mount faithful in Israel to seek to take back the Temple Mount. These are all ideas about our place in the scheme of things, and the ideas are so powerful that they will actually lead people to kill. People will commit murder in the name of those ideas and believe that they are doing something right. It's one of the reasons why I was interested in writing War God about the Spanish conquest of Mexico, because there we have two peoples, the Spanish and the Aztecs, who absolutely believed that they were doing the will of their God. And in doing that will, there's no evidence for that, no proof for it whatsoever. It's absolutely grounded in nothing, but their idea that that was what they were doing led them to act in a most horrendous way towards fellow human beings. So ideas are extremely powerful. And I think one of the things that we need to do as human beings is step back from those ideas and say, well, yes, okay, I've been told this from my childhood, but maybe it's not true. Maybe I should be looking for other explanations. Always keep an open mind.
That's a very interesting point. It's kind of a metaphor for, this book is kind of a metaphor for even what's going on right now.
Well, indeed, the world today is filled with religious conflict, where people in the name of ideas are doing the most horrendous things to each other, and the world is filled with hatred and fear and suspicion, and these religious buttons are being pressed, when actually you get down to it, we're all members of the human family. There is no difference between us. We all have our hopes and our fears and our ambitions and our dreams. We all want to see our children grow up to live secure and interesting lives. We all want a roof over our head. We all want to experience love and joy. Those are the fundamental uniting characteristics of the human creature, and we artificially divide ourselves from one another on the basis of religious dogma. And that's the next step forward that we need to take. And that's why I feel that adult sovereignty over consciousness is such an important issue, because once you claim sovereignty over your own consciousness, then you cannot have your buttons pressed by some ideologue in that way. You are going to think things through and think for yourself. And I think that's the next step for the human race. Get away from these structures that have enchained our minds for so long with such negative results.
And just to close the TED thing out, would you ever do another TED Talk again? In your mind, is it finished?
I don't think there's any question of TED ever inviting me to do another TED Talk. I think that would be quite out of the question. It would be quite extraordinary if they did so. Sure, I would do one. Yeah, I mean, I think I would seek some securities first, though, because it's a very dramatic thing to do, to put a talk out there on the internet and then just whip it off, take it offline. I mean, if I feel that actually what is revealed here, I accept the right of TED or any media organization to broadcast what they wish to broadcast, but they should make that decision at the outset. They are making problems in their structure the problems of people who present at TED conferences. It's not my problem that TED is not able to, if TED really wants to rigorously review the contents of talks, they should do that before the talk goes on the air. They shouldn't let it go on the air and then tear it down. Yeah. That's the mistake. So I don't think I would do a TED Talk if there were any suggestion that if my talk didn't agree with their ideology, they would take it offline. They would have to agree at the outset that whatever I said, the talk would stay online. And if they didn't agree with that, then I don't see why I should do it.
I wonder if I could ask you a bit more of a personal question. I know you write, you travel a lot promoting this book, you're speaking at the Breaking Convention. I was just wondering, what's the most difficult thing about what you do as professionally? It seems like writing isn't one of those things, but
I love writing.
You're also the de facto spokesman for the psychedelic movement in the UK to a certain extent, whether you wanted that title or not.
That would be an honourable title if that were true. But I think what I try to speak out for is the issue of cognitive liberty, that we must have the right to think freely. and that includes the right to explore and experiment with our own consciousness, which happens peripherally to involve psychedelics. It's not that psychedelics are my primary issue. My primary issue is freedom of consciousness.
Well, you've convinced me, if that helps.
Really?
Yeah. So I think that
Wow.
the price of the healthcare that we discussed is worth the sovereignty over your own body.
Yeah.
And it seems like a fairly fast turnaround, but that argument was relatively compelling. And you have criminal laws to protect
to protect against harms that are done.
So
yeah, I think it is a very fundamental and important issue. But in terms of what is the most difficult thing that I do, look, I really enjoy my life. I feel blessed to be alive at all. I feel blessed to have had the opportunities I've had to explore the world, to have extraordinary experiences, to constantly be learning and growing. I won't pretend that every minute of every day is absolute bliss. Sometimes if I've given a talk every evening for 4 or 5 evenings in a row and then go through a weekend of talks after that, I get a bit exhausted, as anybody would. But on the other hand, I get tremendous feedback from my audiences, and I get ideas put to me that I haven't considered before, and there's the energizing feeling of being amongst like-minded people, which makes it all worthwhile. So a writer's life involves, and this is I think true of almost all writers, involves certain periods when you must be out there doing public speaking, and certain periods of retreat when you're sitting very quietly at your desk in front of your computer these days, writing a story. And
is that a lonely, solitary existence?
Well, I don't notice the passage of time. I really love what I do, and that's why I feel blessed, because I realize there are many people who do not love what they're doing and are still required to give 8 or 10 or 12 hours of their day, at least 5 days a week, often more. I mean, when I look at young people now, the huge pressures on young people in the economic environment, the vast number of hours of work that are required to be put in, as though your employer kind of owns your soul, as well as those hours of your day. I feel very lucky that I am able to pursue my chosen course, and that I am able to spend those quiet hours. So I don't feel lonely. I get engaged in the story that I'm writing. I imaginatively inhabit the scenes that I describe and the minds of the characters that I create, and I find it enormously fulfilling.
The one constant that of every guest that we've interviewed that's passionate about what they do is that they don't really view it as work, and B, that their time sort of flies by because they're interested in what they do. In the times that I've been captivated by the stuff that I have been working on, you don't realize what is happening to the time. And I think that's
it's a joy.
It's a very constant theme throughout everybody who's passionate about what they do, is that they don't feel the passage of time when they're involved.
And what is next for you in the next few years, and even the next 10 years?
Well, a lot of work, actually, a lot of work. So War God is the first volume of 3 volumes, and I've already written the second volume of the War God series. Volume 1 takes the story up to a gigantic battle that Cortez fought with the Maya just before he encounters the Aztecs. And it takes this. There are 2 central female characters in my novel, and their names are Malinal and Tozi. Tozi is a fictional character, but she's very much based on historical reality. She's a young Aztec witch.
You like having female characters in your fiction,
I do like writing female characters.
Okay. David Cameron does the same. If you look at his movies, Terminator, powerful female. He likes Avatar.
I like writing female characters. I think that for some reason I don't feel I do write male characters, but I feel much more drawn to making the central heroes or heroines of my novels women. Malinal is a historical character, and she became Cortez's mistress, and she became his interpreter. And she is an extraordinary figure. She's reviled in Mexico today. To call somebody a malinchist is to call them a traitor. because she was considered as handing over her country to the Spanish invaders. But we don't know why the moment she encounters Cortés, and she encounters him just after this battle that he fought with the Maya, she's handed over to him as a gift, as a slave. We don't know why she had such a ferocious hatred of Moctezuma, the Aztec emperor. And that's one of the joys of writing fiction, is that I was able to give her that motive, because we meet her and Tosi in the fattening pen, being literally fattened for sacrifice, which is what the Aztecs used to do for their victims. So I bring many stories to a conclusion in Volume 1. It doesn't end on a cliffhanger. It's a completion of a series of journeys. And the next novel, Volume 2, is the next stage of the journey, which brings Cortés up into the highlands and into Tenochtitlan, the capital city of the Aztecs. That Volume 2, is fully written. I have maybe 2 or 3 months of dotting the I's and crossing the T's, just tidying it up, and then that will go to press. Then...
When's that released, roughly?
That will be released in 2014, in the spring of 2014, soon after the paperback of Volume 1 comes out. Okay. Then I have another promise to fulfill, and that is completion of the second volume of my first novel, Entangled. Again, I've written most of it, and I've set aside 2.5, 3 months at the end of this year to finish that as well. And then, because I'm not totally done with non-fiction...
You must be writing all the time.
I'm going to be writing and researching a lot for the next 2 years. I am also writing a sequel to Fingerprints of the Gods, and this takes me back into the realm of non-fiction, and that's provisionally called Magicians of the Gods. There is new evidence now which allows us to reopen the case of a lost civilization. Back in '95, when I published Fingerprints of the Gods, there was a huge wave of interest in it. There was a massive academic backlash. And the academics pretty much argued, well, there was no lost civilization. What's happened since then is a huge amount of compelling new evidence has come out, which strongly supports the notion that we have forgotten a whole gigantic episode in the human story, and pins the date down very clearly to between 12,000 and 13,000 years ago. 12,900 years ago, the Earth was hit by a comet. It was very large. It broke into fragments, rather like Shoemaker-Levy 9, which hit Jupiter spectacularly in 1994. It created impact craters like the Carolina Bays in North America. They're the results of the impact with that comet. It threw up a gigantic dust cloud into the upper atmosphere of the Earth, radiated the sun's rays back into space for 1,000 years. And geologists have known for a long time that 12,900 years ago, suddenly, just as the Earth was coming out of the Ice Age, it went back into a dramatic deep freeze. And geologists call that period the Younger Dryas. They were not clear why it happened. That evidence has now come out since 2007, really beyond any serious argument anymore. The arguments have all been had in the last 5 or 6 years. We were hit by a comet 12,900 years ago. Many large species of animal went extinct at that time, and I think we lost a whole human civilization then as well. There were survivors. They settled around the world in places like Egypt, places like Mexico and Peru, and they passed down the traditions and such wisdom as they had been able to preserve. So it's new evidence of that caliber, and much, much more to do with certain archaeological sites around the world, which have persuaded me that it's time to really complete the story that I began with Fingerprints of the Gods.
And you have a huge fan base for your nonfiction work.
Yes, there's a very large fan base for the nonfiction work. I mean, Fingerprints of the Gods sold approximately 5 million copies around the world. That's 5 million people who are interested in the subject. And my job now is to deliver a large dossier of new evidence to them, so that they can do what they did with Fingerprints of the Gods, which is argue with the academics about the truth of history.
You know, Graham, you're 62 now, and at what point do you start thinking about your legacy? You know, projects that will complete your work for your lifetime, or do you look at it that way? Is that a dangerous mentality?
I'll jump in that he thinks he's got 1,000 years of legacy to come. So why does the next 10 really matter? Not mean to be facetious.
No, it's a fair point. It's a fair point. I don't know what I've got to come, because, but I do believe that I have learnt important lessons in the last decade, particular, that I have tried to change my life. I have tried and continue to try to be a nurturing and positive person rather than a negative person. When I look back on my arrogance, I was a terribly arrogant person. I was harsh. I was often unkind 10, 15 years ago. I think I've dealt with a lot of that, and I'm continuing to try to deal with that. I would like to be able to get to the end of this physical incarnation and look back on it and say, well, yeah, I made some serious mistakes, but I also tried to put them right. And in the end, on balance, I did good rather than harm. That's what I would hope to be able to say at the end of it. And whether I'll come back and be reborn in another body, drink the waters of forgetfulness, not know that that was my predicament, who knows? I have no idea. I can't prove it. I have a strong instinct that that may be what happens, but I can't know for sure. So what do I want to do with the rest of my life? Live as good a life as possible, be a positive influence upon others rather than a negative influence, which includes recognizing that I have behaved negatively in the past and that I don't want to repeat that again. And to exercise such creative gifts as the universe has given me to the full. To write the best books that I can possibly write, and to explore the most extraordinary ideas that I can possibly explore in the time that I have left. That's what I want to do, and every day to say thank you. I am grateful. I am grateful to have had this chance to live in a human body, to be on this beautiful garden of a planet, and to learn from my mistakes.
Yeah, I know you have children. I've had some communication with Luke in the past, and to the 20-year-old listening, and maybe you even give this advice to your children. What do you tell them if they want to, if they're unsure now? You talked about these jobs that can take 10, 12 hours of your day. You have to be checking your emails on your BlackBerries at night, and we've both been there before, Patrick. What advice do you give them as far as if they want to grow up with a better consciousness or grow up and do big things with their life?
Look, we all have to get through this physical life, and we need to meet our physical needs. I mean, we are physical creatures, and it's really tough, if you're living on the streets and you don't have a roof over your head and you can't clothe yourself or feed yourself adequately. That is a very, very, very tough life to lead. So I think it is important to pay attention to earning a living. You cannot avoid that, but try to find a way to do that where you don't have to sacrifice all your dreams. Try to find a way to make your dreams work for you. Don't let the dreams go. Don't sacrifice the dreams for the security of a career. Try to find a way where you can integrate the dreams into your career.
Amen.
Going to get both of us thinking a lot about this today. How do people get a hold of War God? I know there was an issue between the US and the UK.
Yeah, so War God, well, first of all, if people are interested in the book, go to my website, grahamhancock.com. There's a very clearly marked War God section of grahamhancock.com. There are 4 chapters from the book, free to read online there. There are background articles about the content of the book, free to read online. So there's a lot of material. People don't just have to go out and buy the book on faith. You can check it out on my website and see whether it's the kind of story that you want to read or not. It's available right now from Amazon UK. I've had a huge, this is one of the areas where I've had a problem. In Britain, we have the Waterstones bookshop chain. There are 300 bookshops in the Waterstones chain. Initially, they took just 125 copies of War God, on the grounds that I am unknown as a novelist, and therefore nobody will buy my novels. Well, that's what I call a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you put 125 books in 300 bookshops, they are completely invisible. They cannot be seen, and therefore, of course, people will not buy them.
But they stock all your other books.
Yes, my non-fiction they stock,
I know.
but not the novel. So I hope that situation is going to improve. And if people can't find the book in a branch of Waterstones, they can always get Waterstones to order it. That tends to make Waterstones Central Command wake up and think, oh, maybe there is some demand for this novel. Secondly, it's available on Amazon.
On a random note, what percentage of books is sold through bookshops anymore? I can't remember the last time, apart from at an airport, that I bought a book. I would download it to my iPad.
It's radically falling, but they're still an important force.
Right.
There's no doubt about that. Now, what's happening in America with this book is again on the grounds that I'm unknown as a novelist. No major mainstream American publisher has bought this novel, but I have made an arrangement with a very small publisher to release an electronic version, a Kindle version of War God at a very low price. Because one of the things I feel quite strongly about when we talk book trade is that mainstream publishers charge outrageous prices for Kindles. The UK Kindle price of this book is £10.99. Amazon are selling the hardback for £12. There should be a bigger difference between the Kindle price and the
Kindle, they have to pay VAT.
They have to pay VAT.
So in the UK, so that's 20% added on. But usually, because I'm a keen buyer of novels for my iPad, they're usually about £1 or £2 cheaper. But it should be, given that there's no infrastructure cost, it should be significantly lower.
It should be significantly lower. There's no paper. There's no binding.
There's no delivery. There's no transportation.
There's no transportation. Yeah. There's no warehouses. There's no stock. It goes straight out to the reader electronically in a second.
Yes.
And the prices should not be so high. And I think publishers are just very afraid of this. They're so invested in the large-scale infrastructure, they're very afraid that if they bring the prices from Kindle down, it'll take the bottom completely out of the market for printed books. And some sort of happy medium has to be found. But the choice I've made in America is to release my book as a low-cost Kindle in America, and that will be available from the end of July 2013 on US Amazon.
You've also got another 4 books coming, so you can invest now, because once this becomes a bestseller, everybody's going to want it for the next 3 or 4, or however many you've got. So
I take nothing for granted. So far, the reactions to those who have read this book have been positive, and I hope it tells a compelling story, and I hope, offered at a very low price in America, that it will encourage more people to pick it up than would otherwise pick it up, and we'll see where it goes from there.
You know, Graham, my last question is just as a UK citizen. I guess we're all UK citizens, and I was wondering, we talked about this right over the sovereignty of our own body. What is something that someone listening can do now to make that change happen? You know, do you recommend that people do it politically, as far as electing members? Do they come out of the closet psychedelically? What's the best thing?
I think that it's a whole range of things. I think we need to be much more vociferous in relation to our members of Parliament. And we need to tell them that we object to the drug laws. We object to them strongly and passionately, and that we will not vote for a member of Parliament who supports the existing drug laws. Right now, MPs feel it's the safest thing for them to do to support the existing drug laws, and we have powerful newspapers like the Daily Mail who go on huge campaigns in support of the existing drug laws. So it takes courage. I think we can help to encourage our MPs by letting us know as citizens that we feel a change is really necessary in this case. And yes, I mean, if more people were willing to come out of the closet, as we know, I mean, that was a huge factor in the gay rights movement as well. You know, we have to have the courage of our convictions and not be afraid to speak out on this. It won't be an easy road. Little by little, social change will come, but never forget that the powers that be have huge power that they can use against us, and that it can be difficult to get a job, you know, if you admit to using psychedelics or cannabis for that matter. We live in a society where people are very afraid to talk openly on this issue, and that's, if you think about it, to be afraid to speak out on an issue like this tells us something about the kind of society we live in. And do we really want to live in a society like that? Or, you know, can we have the courage of our convictions and work to change it?
On that same note, this recent information with the NSA and Edward Snowden, do you have a take on that? Or does it just kind of magnify all the things that you have been saying?
I detest the surveillance society. I detest the way that our fears are being manipulated to allow the big dominant state to insert its controlling fingers into every aspect of our lives. Nothing good is going to come out of that. We are going down a very dark road when we tolerate that occurring. Yes, there are costs of reducing surveillance, but those costs also, I think, are worth paying. We should not sacrifice our freedom in that way. It's a terrible, terrible thing to do. And where is it going to lead? As we empower these big bureaucracies more and more, as we give them the right to investigate and inquire into every minute aspect of our lives, where will it be 10 or 15 or 20 years from now? Do we really want to live in a world like that in George Orwell's 1984? Or do we want to live in Aldous Huxley's Island, which was a much more interesting place to be?
Graham, I get stopped all the time, and people say they like London Real, and I'm like, I always say, what's your favorite show? And it's consistently you.
It's not me.
It's not. It wasn't you. It was Graham, and you still have our highest iTunes downloads. Your episode has over 1 million downloads on the iTunes, and it's just, in a way, you're kind of almost synonymous with London Real. You were one of our relatively early guests, and just people kind of equate your positivity and your message along with us. And it's always a big pleasure having you on.
Thank you for saying that. So, I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to be here, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
No, fantastic. Please come back more often whenever you're in town. I know this was not easy to do. You had a long day talking, and now you're going to driving back to Bath, so thanks for taking the time.
It's a pleasure.
For people out there, it's Twitter, it's Graham_Hancock. Follow him there. He is active on Facebook. You're enjoying that more now.
I'm enjoying Facebook a lot. I have 2 Facebook pages. One of them is my author page, which has an unlimited number of likes on it, and the other is my personal page, where you can have 5,000 friends. I've got 5,000 friends, and then 17,000 subscribers or followers, I think, as they're called. Okay. Actually, I put the same content on both Facebook pages, and I don't discriminate between them. But what they are for me, again, are a way of communicating directly with a large community of like-minded people. And this also is a sign of the way forward, that if we are going to move forward as a species, we need to let go of old ideas like nationalism, that our loyalty belongs to a particular nation or government, which by chance we happen to be born into. And we need to move forward to the idea of communities of ideas, of free, sovereign individuals who join together in groups around positive and worthwhile ideas.
Which is what the internet does.
And that's what the internet does, and that's what it allows. And it is going to reshape the world. Mm-hmm. And those structures that have been in place for really pretty much the last 5,000 years, those structures are nearing their end. I think everybody knows this. And a new structure is struggling to be born. And in the process, there's this waking up of human consciousness that is taking place and manifesting in different ways all around the world. So we live in a very interesting time, and it's a time when we need to remember we are responsible for ourselves and our choices. Nobody else, just us, and therefore we need to make the right choices.
Excellent. You can go to grahamhancock.com, pick up a copy of War God. I'm going to walk into Waterstones on Piccadilly next time I'm there, and I'm going to tell them that I want more copies in the store, and you can do that too. I would love to see a little bit of a grassroots.
Thank you for that support. Yeah. I appreciate it. The best way with Waterstones is just get them to order it, and then all their ordering is done centrally, so that the message filters back. Gosh, people are actually interested in this book. Maybe we should put it in the front of the shop.
Go figure. All right, we'll do that. Patrick, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me again.
It's so important, I think, on shows like this to have kind of a good, healthy debate, because there's so many people listening that feel the way that you do, and it's nice to get you and Graham talking, and so they can see everything flesh out a bit.
And these are things that I've never really had to think about before, so it's very interesting for me to, hence the reason I had a quick turnaround is because having not really thought about it before, you see something that makes sense that you kind of have to embrace it.
That's an amazing turnaround. for you, but he's such a powerful man, so that's why.
Yeah. Thank you.
If you want to follow us, we're on Twitter at London Real TV. If you want to see all of our faces and you're listening to us on iTunes, we're on YouTube channel London Real. And that's it. We're on Facebook too. If you want to send an email to me personally, it's info@londonreal.tv. Gentlemen, until then, it's about the journey. I wish you both very well.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Welcome to London.
On London Real, we like to push the envelope on psychedelics. We went in and we drank ayahuasca, and it was the real deal.
Ayahuasca requires us to confront the truth about ourselves.